Howdy, folks. Welcome to Storytime. I'm Murph. First of all, if you're listening to this on the premiere date, I wish you a very happy new year. And if you're not, I certainly hope whatever year you are listening to it in is a good one for you. In this edition of Storytime, we're going to be listening to episode 5 of The Lands, which is part 5 of chapter 1, Something is Happening. Before we listen to it, though, let's talk a little bit about what's happened in the lands. First of all, Grimmer has traveled to the kingdom to retrieve Sheriff Bob at Rosie's Tavern so Gonzo can talk with him. On the way there, though, he thought the old dead tree had exploded, but it didn't. The old man on the ledge is very concerned about the lands and the state that it's in. He feels something is happening, especially after his nightmare of riding around the lands on the front of a steam engine train. His old wolf Sheba thinks that he should do something about it. The old wizard Merle thought he was dying high up in his bedroom in a tower of the castle of the kingdom. He had been waiting for death for a while now. Did it finally happen? And Captain Hobogon has shown up in Hubland in the neutral lands after Mitch was sent to get him. Much to his surprise, he was summoned because a young man was passed out by the base of the statue in Hubland. But he finds out it's much more than that. The young man was passed out on a patch of beautiful green grass, a rarity in the neutral lands for a long, long time. Something is happening. Now, stick around after the credits of this episode, and hear a little more about it. In the meantime, a 1 and a 2, and away we go. Hello, and welcome to the lands. Episode 5. Chapter 1, Something is Happening, Part 5. This episode's quote, "Something is happening." Merle. At the base of the statue, in the center of the neutral lands known as Hubland, the young man lay face down in a patch of lush green grass. He began to hear voices, mumbles in the darkness. He could sense people around him, and at least one person beside him. He wasn't sure whether his eyes were open or closed, but he did realize that he was face down on the ground. He lifted his head and looked around, confirming yes, his eyes were open, and yes, there were people standing around. But it was dark and things were blurry, and he was so cold, and the ringing in his head was loud, so he rested his head back on the green grass. He felt someone trying to roll him over and saying something. With a little help, he succeeded in rolling over and getting on his back. Whoever it was pulled back the heavy brown jacket he was wearing, then grabbed his white, blue, and red striped shirt, trying to remove whatever it was that was on it. That quick tug was all he needed. Suddenly, all his senses came to him in full strength, and he sat up quickly. There was a man kneeling beside him, who smiled. "Hello, I'm Captain Hobogon, commander of the Neutral Lands Army. However, I am not here in that capacity right now," he said. Captain Hobogon put one hand on the man's shoulder and the other on the man's forehead. You seem to have a nasty bump here, partner, and you seem to be suffering from hypothermia," he said, examining the young man's head. "Good thing I have extensive medical training. We'll get you taken care of in no time." "Sarge!" Captain Hobogon yelled. "She's off tonight, Captain," Victor told him. "Oh, yeah, I forgot." The captain motioned to one of the soldiers standing by. "Can you bring a blanket over here, please?" he called out. A large blanket was brought over. "You have a name, young man?" The young man just stared at Captain Hobogon. The captain seemed to be talking fast, and his words were distorted. Captain Hobogon could tell by the look on the young man's face that he still wasn't completely conscious. He let out a little laugh. "Oh, still have some cobwebs in the old attic, eh?" He laughed a little more at what he thought was a pretty funny saying. No one else reacted. The young man closed his eyes tight, trying to get the ringing in his head to stop. We'll get you over to Merchant Valley. Can you stand? The young man stared at Captain Hobogon, still waiting for his brain to completely comprehend what was happening. His body shivered as they wrapped the blanket around him. As he grabbed the blanket and pulled it tight around him, a thought popped into his head. Where am I? He whispered aloud, still sitting on the ground. Well, right now you're sitting on the ground in Hubland, answered the captain. Hubland? Where the heck is... Oh. The man felt his head get light. He lay back down, pulling the blanket even more tighter around him. I've never heard of a place called... His consciousness once again began to leave. As he stared up at the sky, he saw what appeared to be a statue of a man pointing off to the distance. Hey, the young man tried to yell. Is that the way home? Then he was out. Captain Hobogon checked to make sure the man was still breathing. He was. Something not right here, he said. Sarge! He yelled out. She's off tonight, Captain, Victor told him again. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Can I get some help here? A group of soldiers came over and lifted the unconscious man up and laid him on the back of a horse. Tom! Captain Hobogon yelled. Yes, sir, Tom answered. Ride into Merchant Valley and see if Queen Kwan is in her shop. If so, ask her if she can help us by letting this young man rest there. Yes, sir. Captain Hobogon watched as Tom rode off in the darkness. The rest of us will transport our young guest slowly back to Merchant Valley. Captain Hobogon turned back and looked at the patch of green grass. Never in all my years. The caravan moved across the empty land in a hurried but not panicked pace. They felt that they were in pretty good shape. Not much farther and they should be in Hubland. Then it should be home free to Merchant Valley. There the tribal occupants would sit until things cooled down and then move on to complete the second part of their mission. But for right now, it was most important to just keep their steady pace. In the back of the wagon sat Princess Natalie and her entourage. The princess was the oldest daughter of the great Chief Isaacs, the leader of the Western Territories tribe. Her entourage consisted of the tribe's ambassador and doctor, Running Chavez, and the princess's personal nanny, Giggling Zamora. Princess Natalie didn't really want them to accompany her, for the mission was far too dangerous, but they insisted. They would not allow their beloved princess to be on her own during this time. Besides, they added to the cover, and the princess was deeply moved by their support. Where is Captain Hobogon and his army? The princess asked with concern. They should have detected us by now. He's probably out on one of his wild adventures, answered Running Chavez. Giggling Zamora giggled at the response in her high-pitched manner. The spirit only knows what he is doing. Well, I was really counting on him meeting us by now, the princess continued. If the corporation decides to chase us, it would have been nice to have him here for protection. Oh dear, do not worry so much, Giggling Zamora spoke. They will not harm you. You are the heir to the tribe, and they must respect you. Besides, there is no sign that they have even detected us. Just then, in the distance, there came a faint humming noise. They looked at each other. Oh, maybe I spoke too soon, Giggling Zamora said with a nervous giggle. Or you cursed us, shot back Running Chavez. The humming turned into a roaring as the pursuers came closer. Princess Natalie looked out the back of the wagon and could see the lights of the corporation's miniature motorized vehicles approaching rather quickly. She realized her mission was about to come to an abrupt halt, but she'd sort of planned for this. Time has run out, but there is still a chance to succeed. She looked at her worried comrades. Fear not, friends, she said with a smile. Maybe they are just chasing us because they heard there is a wagon filled with 3 beautiful women. Besides, she continued, heading towards the front of the wagon, you know I always have a plan. She figured it was no use to try and outrun the corporation, so she leaned out to the horses and gave a loud whistle, which caused them to stop. She grabbed what appeared to be a torch from her personal belongings, jumped out of the wagon and unhitched the lead horse, which happened to be her personal horse, Kenneth. She truly loved this horse, and she knew he loved her. He was the fastest horse in the lands, and she knew he would not fail her. She led him off in the distance, then stopped. Running Chavez and Giggling Zamora poked their heads out of the wagon and could see the princess in the distance. It looked as though she was having a serious conversation with her horse. Not too far behind them, the roaring was approaching quickly. "What is that crazy woman doing?" Giggling Zamora asked. "What does it look like? She's talking to her horse," replied the no-nonsense Running Chavez. "I just hope she knows what she is doing." Princess Natalie looked back towards the caravan and to the approaching forces behind it. She grabbed the magic torch she had placed in Kenneth's mouth and put it in a bag on his side. She made sure it was secure, gave her horse a kiss, then drove him off. It was then time to begin Operation Diversion. As the corporation's forces arrived in their miniature motorized vehicles, they found the tribal members performing some sort of ritual. A fire had been lit, and 3 people sat facing the fire, chanting. The forces encircled the caravan, then stopped. "Who is in charge here?" Commander Kerr asked over a loudspeaker, her voice sounding very authoritative. No answer. "I ask again, who's in charge here?" They trained bright lights on the party. One of the 3 sitting on the ground turned around. "Shh! Can you not see we are performing a nighttime ritual?" scolded Running Chavez. "I care about as much about your nighttime ritual as I do about the dirt I'm standing on," answered Commander Kerr with an irritated tone. She looked down at the dirt and saw how soft it looked, and for an instant she wanted to sit down in it and draw pictures. But she quickly composed herself. "So, before I just decide to eliminate you all, I ask a final time, who's in charge here?" The chanting stopped. "I am." Princess Natalie stood up from the center of the 3 sitting figures. She began walking slowly towards the voice that was hidden behind the bright lights. "I am Princess Natalie of the Western Territories tribe. We are on our way to Merchant Valley for a— Save me your excuses. I don't care. You are all under arrest. Resistance is futile and will only lead to disciplinary action, up to and not excluding termination." The forces wasted no time in seizing them. They doused the fire, destroyed the wagon, and loaded them all up in the little cars. The speed at which they executed this amazed even Princess Natalie. She tried to beg that the others be spared, but there was no listening. As she was being loaded into a vehicle, Princess Natalie looked out to the distance. She hoped the other half of the party was doing better, and she prayed she had given Kenneth enough time to get away undetected. The vehicles all headed back towards Techland. Princess Natalie breathed a sigh of relief. Now she hoped somebody would get her message and act on it. The wizard flew through the darkness, riding on the forceful wind. Ahead of him was a lone rider, heading out to the darkness on his horse. He knew who it was. It was Mahone, and he was trying to leave the lands. Well, the wizard was going to have none of that. With his staff lighting the way, he swooped over the head of the lone rider and landed right in front of him. His staff was aglow even brighter, and the power from it stopped the wind. "Mahone!" the wizard yelled. "You will return immediately back to the lands," the wizard commanded. "But Merle, I have to leave," Mahone whimpered. "No! You will turn around and return to the lands this instant," the wizard Merle yelled in his most authoritative tone. Merle whirled his staff around, which caused Mahone to be lifted up in the air and turned so he landed facing the lands. "You will return this instant and keep the spirit alive." "Wow!" Mahone exclaimed. "That was like an e-ticket." Merle laughed aloud at the comment, which caused everything to slowly fade as he woke up from the dream of an event that never happened. High up in his tower bedroom of the castle of the kingdom, facing the neutral lands, the old wizard Merle opened his bloodshot eyes and let out a wimpy, poor excuse for a laugh. It was a nervous, scared laugh, but a laugh none the same. He struggled to focus his eyes on something, anything, in the dark room. He rolled on his side and pushed himself up to sit on the bed, resting his feet on the cold, damp floor. The hair on his head and beard was long, gray-white, and a mess. His face had the expression of a man who was just counting the minutes, maybe the seconds, before his life was to be over. And that wasn't going to be such a bad thing for him. But something had awakened him. Ah, yes, it was the dream. He had a dream about Mahone. Mahone was leaving the lands, and he was stopping him. But that never happened, as much as the old wizard wished it had. One of the many things he wished he had done, but didn't. He looked out his window, only to see a sliver of a moon. Even though it wasn't much, it gave just enough light for him to look around the room. He felt as though there was someone or something there. It was a sense he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Who's there?" he called out in barely a whisper. His voice was scratchy and strained. He listened for a moment, then said to himself, "No one's there, old fool. No one's been there for a long, long time." He squinted his eyes as he looked around the room. There was something, but he just couldn't find it. With much effort, he lifted himself off the bed. His bones creaked and moaned about as loud as the bed did. He took in a deep breath and stumbled over to the window. From it he could see far out over the deserted land. He licked his lips and peered out. Far out in the neutral lands, it looked as though there was a commotion or something. It was too far and too dark for him to make out what was happening, but he knew something was happening. He took a step back and drew in another breath. Something was happening. He staggered back to his bed and plopped down on it. He reached over to his nightstand and grabbed the flint stick to light his candle. His hand shook as he tried to get it close enough to the wick in order to light it, but then he stopped. Something was different. Something was happening. He put the flint stick down and stared at his hand. He waved his shaking, wrinkled hand over the candle, and it lit. The candle flickered dimly, trying desperately to stay lit, but it was lit. The old man sat up straight, staring at the flickering candle, surprised by what he had just accomplished. "Something is happening," he whispered to nobody. The old man stared at the flickering candle, still amazed that he had been able to light it. "I haven't been able to do magic in," he said softly in a hoarse voice. He looked again at his hand, then back to the flickering flame. "Something is happening." He tried to stand but failed. He took a deep breath and held it. There was something different in the air. He let it go slowly, as though he wanted to hold it in because it felt so good. He took in another deep breath and reacted as though he smelled a bouquet of flowers. Slowly he let it out, and without hesitation he stood up. Out the window he saw another commotion. This one was far off to the left. It looked as though someone was burning something. He closed his eyes and tried to feel what was happening, but he couldn't. Long, long ago he may have been able to, but not now. However, there was something happening. He started to feel as though maybe he could. And there was only one thing that could make that possible. The old man closed his eyes. Then he heard something, or thought he heard something. He wasn't quite sure. Squeak! He opened his eyes and looked around the candlelit room. Could it be possible? He heard it again. Squeak! Yes. That time he was sure he heard it. He took a few steps towards the door, and sure enough, right by his staff by the door, sitting tall like he was happy to be seen, was Mouse! The old man exclaimed, almost falling over in excitement. Squeak! Mouse! It is you! Mouse stood up. Squeak! Mouse took a few steps towards the old man, then turned and ran under the door. A crystal on the top of the staff by the door flickered ever so softly. It struggled to shine, much like the candle had done earlier. The crystal let out a soft, reassuring glow. The old man sat down on his bed. He tried to smile, but it just wasn't going to happen. Those muscles have not been used in too long. He closed his eyes and looked like he was dreaming of things long since gone. "Something is happening," he whispered to nobody. "Welcome back, my old friend." calm darkness gave the streets of the only town in the Western Territories a false sense of peace. It never really had an official name, but since it was really the only town in the land, it therefore became synonymous with it. The Western Territory stretched far and wide. Besides the town, there were the Thunder Mountains, which supplied the largest amount of gold, silver, and jewels in all the lands, the River of Wonder, which cradled the island in its watery arms, and the tribe, which resided away from everyone at the top of the river. All throughout the Western Territories were ranches and farms. Like many of the businesses in the town of the Western Territories, a number of those farms and ranches were owned by a man named Gonzo. The town was asleep, except for the third floor of the horseshoe. Standing at the window, looking out at the deserted dirt below, was a very upset Sheriff Bob. His arms were crossed and his lips were pressed together. He was doing all he could to keep from showing his anger. A loud, long, heavy sigh came from the man sitting behind the desk to the left of the sheriff. It was a trademark of Gonzo's, the man behind the desk. He would release a long snort of air through his nose, kind of like a bull. It was his way of saying either "don't bother me," or "you're taking too long," or "I'm about to explode, so watch out." Needless to say, it wasn't a sound one liked to hear. Right now, it was a "you're taking too long" sigh. Sheriff Bob turned around. "Look, Gonzo, it's not that I don't like the idea. It's that I'm just not sure it's fair." Gonzo let out a little laugh. "And as sheriff of the Western Territories, I have a responsibility." "Chala!" Gonzo cut in, slamming his cane to the floor. Grimmer was sitting in the corner of the room, acting like he was sleeping, but in reality was watching everything that was going on. He jumped a bit at the loud noise the cane made. Gonzo continued. "Sheriff of the Western Territories. And who got you that position of power, Sheriff Bob?" That would be you," Sheriff Bob answered. "That's right, Sheriff Bob," Gonzo continued, pointing his cane at the sheriff. "And don't you think I know what this town needs, Sheriff Bob? Wouldn't I know what's good and not good for the town, Sheriff Bob?" Each time Gonzo said Sheriff Bob, he did so in a way that was mocking him. Sheriff just stared at Gonzo, wishing he had the guts to draw his gun and shoot him dead. "I realize, Sheriff Bob, that you take your job seriously, and I like that. But," Gonzo stood up and began a slow walk towards the sheriff, passing Grimmer, who was acting like he was trying to sleep, but in reality was watching everything going on. "Let's not forget, Sheriff Bob, who is really in charge here, shall we? I mean, chala, if I decided today I wanted a new sheriff, you'd be in the unemployment line tomorrow. So, what do you say, Sheriff Bob? Will you pass an ordinance making it illegal for anyone from the tribe to sell their own goods here in town, or not?" Sheriff Bob was now face to face with Gonzo, and he didn't care much for it. Nobody ever challenged Gonzo. If he couldn't convince you with his words, then he tried with his weight. And if that didn't work, his boys would get into the act. His boys, his guards, especially the one known as the Grim Reaper, were nothing to fool around with. Those who did, never did again. In fact, only one man had ever slipped through the grip of the great Gonzo, and he hasn't been seen in the Western Territories for a while. Sheriff Bob liked his job, and his life, so whatever questions he had about the proposal were now answered. "Okay," Sheriff Bob regretfully agreed. "I will go to my office and draft up an ordinance. It'll say that the tribe may now only sell its goods in your stores, paying you for the opportunity to sell their goods." Then something inside the sheriff snapped. He poked his finger into Gonzo's chest. "But don't you ever threaten me again." With that little poke, Grimmer shot his eyes towards the sheriff. The look was not a nice one, and it made the sheriff back away from Gonzo. But he continued, still very upset. "People of this town elected me sheriff. Oh, sure, you were my main backer, but since I've had this job, I think I've won their confidence. So, don't think for a second that I'm afraid of you taking my job away from me." Deep down, however, he was afraid. He really liked this job, but he hated Gonzo. He knew he couldn't outmuscle Gonzo, but he knew one way to hurt him. He looked over Gonzo's shoulder to Grimmer, then looked Gonzo right in the eyes. "By the way, Have you found Mad Dog yet? He knew the answer to the question, and only asked it because he knew it would piss Gonzo off. With that, he stormed out of the office. Gonzo gave him a good long stare as he walked out. He let out another long, bull-like sigh. That last comment angered him, but he started to laugh anyways. "I love it when they leave all upset like that," he said with a big smile. "But you see how Mad Dog has made me a laughing stock." He stomped over to the same window the sheriff was looking out of. "He's out there somewhere, and I intend on making him pay." Grimmer stood up. "Let me go after him, boss," he said. Gonzo just stared out the window. He watched as Sheriff Bob walked out of the horseshoe and across the dirt road to his office. Gonzo smirked. "Looks like the sheriff is working late tonight." He gave out a loud laugh. "You staying here tonight, boss?" Grimmer asked. Gonzo continued to stare out the window. "Boss, you staying here tonight? You going home?" Gonzo finally broke out of his trance. "What?" he yelled. "Are you staying here or you going home?" "I'm staying here. Go ahead and go. I got a few more things to do, then I'll call it quits. You can go." "Sure thing, boss," Grimmer said. He walked to the door, adjusting his holster as he did. He liked to be prepared in case someone was standing behind the door. He stopped and turned to Gonzo. "Boss, you know that big old dead tree just outside the kingdom?" "What?" Gonzo asked impatiently. "That old dead tree outside the kingdom." "You mean the spirit tree? Yeah, what about it?" "What's the deal with it?" "I don't know. Ask Matthews. He's all into that stuff now. All I know is as soon as I get my way, I'm chopping it down and developing that area." "You think the kingdom will be okay with that?" "I don't care, Grimmer. King Michael is too wimpy to do anything if I did. But I'm not chopping that tree down until I see Mad Dog swinging from it." Grimmer smiled. His boss really had a one-track mind. "I don't know why you don't let me go get him, boss." "Maybe, Grimmer. Maybe soon," Gonzo said as he resumed staring at the window. "Okay, well, I'll be in my room if you need me. Otherwise, I'll see you in the morning, boss," Grimmer said as he opened the door. "Be ready tomorrow, Grimmer. It could be an interesting day," Gonzo said without turning. He had no idea how true that statement was. "And maybe, if we get lucky, maybe in the morning Mad Dog will be all tied up and sitting on the bench outside the horseshoe. Wouldn't that be nice?" "Sure would, boss. Sure would," Grimmer said with that eternal smile on his face. No matter what was going on or what was being said, Grimmer always seemed to have a slight smile in his eyes and mouth, almost like he knew something you didn't, and he was enjoying it. He looked over at his tortured boss. Mad Dog was Gonzo's Moby Dick. He was the thorn in his paw. And Grimmer hated to see his boss this way. Sometime soon he was going to have to take care of business. He just knew it. He left the room with Gonzo still staring out the window. He was thinking of Mad Dog. "Chadley, we had him!" he yelled. The old man and the wolf stood on the mountain ledge just staring out over the lands, his tanned face showing a look of concern. "It has been a while since we saw those flares, Sheba. I can feel it in my bones. Something is not right." The wolf looked up at the man and let out a little howl. "You're right, Sheba. If no one else is going to do something, then I should." "There isn't a whole lot I can do, but..." He turned and went inside the cave. He dropped his blanket as he walked past the fire that burned in the center of the large space. The cave was rather sparse. There were a few small tables, some chairs, a desk, a large cabinet, and a cot which was up against the wall. There was a hole in the wall that led to another room. Far off to the left there was another opening that led out of the cave. The man walked over to the desk. He opened the drawer and removed an ornate box. He hesitated a moment before opening it, like he was showing some respect for its contents. Then he opened it. It was full of stuff like small specimen jars, cards, small sealed bags, and even some bones. He moved things around until he found what he was looking for. It was a small leather bag. He took it out and lifted it high in the air, staring at it like it was the largest diamond ever found. "I hate to do this, but I think you are our last hope," he said to the contents of the bag. He put the bag in an inside pocket of the coat he was wearing. He put the box back in the desk and went over to the cabinet. He looked at different jars and tubes and bags until he found the ones he wanted. He then took them over to a small table by the fire. "I don't know, Sheba. Remember the last time I tried to help? That was really a disaster," she whined as she lay down by the fire. He paced back and forth, looking out to the lands. The breeze had really picked up. He walked out to the ledge and stood there, trying to understand the strange feeling he was having. He took a deep breath and sadness came over him. "Sheba, I sure hope this works." Sheba let out a howl growl, almost like she was talking to him. The man turned around to see she was now sitting next to the fire looking at him. She motioned her head towards the fire. The man could see something was happening in the fire. He moved quickly back into the cave, looking intensely at the fire. Images appeared within it. It was a wagon traveling quickly through the neutral lands. "What is that?" the man asked. It then changed to show Captain Hobogon and his men traveling slowly towards Merchant Valley. The body of an unconscious man was lying over the back of one of the horses. The old man moved so close to the fire that he almost walked into it. "Who is that?" he asked. "Who the captain have there?" He closed his eyes. He could still see the man on the back of the horse. He took another step towards the fire. Sheba got up and situated herself between the old man and the fire, just to be on the safe side. She turned herself so she was right in front of him, but also looking at the fire. She let out another howl growl. "I don't know who he is, but I'm trying to see." He moved closer to the man in the vision. He was trying to read him. "He is alive." In his vision, he moved around the unconscious man and could see the look on Captain Hobogon's face. "The captain looks confused. That's not surprising." He again moved in on the unconscious man. "I want to know what he is thinking." He tried to move into the unconscious man's mind. There seemed to be only darkness and a ringing. There was a flash of something, but it happened too fast. The darkness suddenly became very bright for a few moments, then went back to darkness. Then there was an image. It was one that the old man recognized. The image flashed again. "He's thinking of the statue in Upland." Then there was the face of Captain Hobogon, which caused the old man to jump. That was scary." Captain Hobogon was introducing himself. Then he disappeared. The image of the statue popped up again, and it remained a little longer. The ringing stopped, and there was only darkness. The old man opened his eyes as the fire returned to being a fire. He smiled as he looked at Sheba, sitting between him and the fire, looking up at him. "I haven't done that in a long time, eh, Sheba?" he said with a smile. Then the fire exploded. The flames were black and angry, and smoke filled the room. The old man and the wolf slowly backed away from the fire, not turning their backs to it, and not showing any fear of it. Sheba let out a deep growl. "It's okay, girl," the old man said, patting her and not taking his eyes off the fire. The smoke disappeared, and the fire returned to normal. "Something is happening, Sheba. Something is definitely happening." Sheba let out a little howl. The old man looked at her and nodded. Yes, I am going to do something." The old man took a deep breath as he tried to build up strength to follow through with his plan. He felt a calmness overcome him. "This is a long shot, but it's a shot all the same." He walked towards the fire. As he approached it, he closed his eyes. What he was about to do was questionable, probably wouldn't work, but at this point he felt he had no choice, and a part of him was actually curious to see if it would work. The real issue was, in order to do it, he would have to destroy the last remnant of his good friend. He stopped at the fire. It danced ever so elegantly, like it has for so many nights. His nights on Splashing Red Rock have not been bad. In fact, he has rather enjoyed them. He took the time to connect with the spirit and to retreat from all the craziness of the lands. But over the years, the spirit, the driving force behind all the lands, seemed to be getting weak. Something was happening, and he didn't know what it was, being he was an outcast. And he couldn't shake the thought that there was one person he knew who could maintain the spirit. He looked at the leather bag and smiled, like it was something that took him back to a better time. "You better do what I expect you to do," he said to the bag. He moved the bag close to his heart and smiled. "But if there was ever anyone who could do it, it's you, my old friend. As you always insisted, I will trust the process." He reached over to the table next to him and took a small glass and flung the contents into the fire. It erupted with a blue flame. Then he picked up a bag and threw it in the fire. It again erupted, this time the fire burning with an intense red flame. He pulled the bag away from his heart, opened it, and removed the contents. It was a few strands of gray hair. "I am definitely trusting the process," he said as he threw the hairs in the fire. There was no reaction at all. The fire continued to burn with the intense red flame. He waved his arms over the fire like he was calling it to do something, but it didn't react. He watched it burn, hoping something would happen, but there was nothing. He turned and walked over to the ledge once again. The lands looked so beautiful, but the spirit just wasn't there, not like it used to be. He began to cry. He moved over to his chair and sat down. From his chair he could sit and observe the lands. On a good night he could see as far as the kingdom, almost as far as Techland. He sat in his chair and closed his eyes. Behind him, the fire settled down for a moment, then erupted. Captain Hobogon and his soldiers moved at a slow, steady pace towards Merchant Valley. The good captain just couldn't wrap his head around what was happening. Victor rode up beside him. "Any idea who the young man could be?" Victor asked Captain Hobogon. "I don't," Captain Hobogon answered. "Looks like I'm going to have to use my extensive investigatory training on this one." Victor rolled his eyes. "Sure does, Captain," Victor replied. Captain Hobogon thought for a moment, then slowed his horse. He turned around. "Does anyone recognize him?" Captain Hobogon asked his soldiers. They all shook their heads no. "He does kind of look familiar, but I can't place it," Peter said. One of the soldiers asked, "Is it Mahone?" "No," said the captain, looking a little agitated by the comment. "Let's not start anything. We need to keep this quiet until we figure out who he is and where he's from. Those are orders. Understood?" "Yes, sir," they all responded. Captain Hobogon looked over at his soldiers and realized something. "Is anyone out doing their runs?" he asked the soldiers. They all looked around at each other. Captain Hobogon shook his head and mumbled, "Never in all my years." He then pointed to Victor and Peter. "Victor and Peter, you come with me. The rest of you, if you are on a run, please return to it. Of the 6 soldiers who rode out with me, 4 of you need to fill in for Team Bomphilius and Team Monetas. I trust you all can manage." The soldiers dispersed, with 2 of them remaining to help escort Captain Hobogon and the young man, along with Victor and Peter. Victor leaned over to the good captain as the soldiers rode away. "If we can't take him to Queen Kwan's, should we take him back to the base?" Victor asked. Captain Hobogon thought a moment. "If we must, but I would rather not." Peter rode up beside Captain Hobogon. "Captain, that's an odd outfit he's wearing. Any idea what land that would be from?" "Sure don't," Captain Hobogon responded. Peter hesitated, then felt the need to continue. "You know, Captain, I'm telling you, there was no young man or grass at the base of the statue before we got knocked out." "How could that be?" Captain Hobogon asked. The 2 just looked at each other. "Captain, when was the last time you saw grass in Hubland, much less the neutral lands?" Victor asked him. "It's been years," he answered. "Decades," Peter said, correcting him. "It's been decades." "Well, if it was to grow anywhere, it should be in Hubland," Captain Hobogon said. Just then, Tom came riding out of the darkness like he was being chased. He rode towards the three men. "Captain," Tom said, saluting Captain Hobogon, "Queen Kwan agreed to have the young man stay at her store. She'll be ready when we arrive." "Very good," Captain Hobogon said. He turned to his men. "Okay, let's go." Captain Hobogon looked over at the young man draped over the horse next to him. He scratched the top of his head with his index finger and said, "Never in all my years have I seen the likes of this." Thank you for visiting the land. We hope you come visit us again soon. Well, I don't know if you know this or not, but something is happening. I'm sure Captain Hobogon will get to the bottom of it. So, episode 5. In this episode, we got introduced to Princess Natalie, Giggling Zamora, and Running Chavez. They are the first people from the tribe that we have met. Fear not, though, there will be more from the tribe that we will meet later on. We also have another appearance by Mouse. This time he's with his old friend Merle. What is that crazy mouse up to? Some behind the scenes talk here. I've mentioned plenty of times, I'm sure, and you're sick of hearing it, that the previous story, or the original story, has been in previous episodes. But in this one, it's actually, there's a scene in this one that was the very first scene in the originals. Also, there are a couple of scenes in here that were very, very early on in the original story as well. The story has grown, obviously, over time. And the current version happened after a couple years ago, after I did a reading with some good friends of mine. I invited them over here. I read it, and they were saying things and making comments and writing notes and stuff. And at the end of it, it was obvious that I needed to extend the timeline a little bit. I needed to explain some stuff before we really got into the meat of the story. So that's what happened. I realized, all right, I need to work on this a little longer. But, you kind of get frustrated, and I stopped writing several times. And then I was taking a train trip. I was taking Amtrak, and I was just kind of talking to different people, and I just so happened to be talking to someone else who was also kind of a writer, a creator of content, I'll say. And after that conversation, I was like, okay, now I think I know what I'm going to do. I think I know how I'm going to start it. Because that was the problem. I wasn't sure how to start this newer version of it. And I think we got it right. I don't know. Again, let me know. All right. So that's what we have today is after that conversation. And it still took a little while to get it to where it is. So there we go. But in this episode, you did hear some very original scenes, almost exactly like how they were written. Almost. Maybe a little different. Anyways, I have a message here from the good old Captain Hobogon. So, Captain Hobogon says, "Hello, I'm Captain Hobogon, commander of the Neutralands Army. However, I am not here at that capacity at this time. I just wanted to remind you that if you're enjoying your time here in the lands, subscribe and turn on notifications to be made aware of opportunities to visit again. And if you are interested in looking around a little more, you can contact me because I have extensive touring capabilities. Let us know if you like what you're hearing by hitting like or leave a comment. You won't want to miss the next episode or anything that's been happening in the lands. Not sure if you know this, but never in all my years have I seen the likes of this. All right. Thank you, Captain Hobogon. And again, great message. Hit subscribe. Turn on your notifications. Hit like if you like us. If you don't like it, then, keep listening. Sooner or later, you might like it. You might realize, hey, this is actually a pretty good story. Hopefully you will join us again real soon and visit the lands with us. And in the meantime, you know what? Just keep the spirit alive.